The Fires of Heaven by Robert Jordan is the fifth book in the Wheel of Time fantasy book series. This book wrecked me emotionally. This is the book that sort of reaches that crux of climax that just completely and utterly destroys you if you're invested in these characters. How can I explain? Okay, I'm going to compare this book to one of my favorite comic book series, Invincible, by Robert Kirkman. Now, in that comic book series, there's this volume, I believe it's volume 5. Volume 5 has this insane battle sequence that's just so bloody, so intense, and so violent that it just shocks you to the core. Because Robert Kirkman's Invincible is a story of a young man who becomes a superhero because his dad's a superhero. And in that storyline, he has to go to another planet to save this alien race of bug people. And he has to fight these two superpowered aliens. And it's just like a bloody, knockdown, like literally like disemboweling kind of fight. And that's what the fifth book of the Wheel of Time feels like. The storyline is that Rand and his Isle have left the Threefold Land, and they're following Couladin because he is pronouncing that he is the Dragon Reborn, and he is pillaging villages on the way to Carhian. So Rand has to stop him. So most of this book with Rand is just him following Couladin and his army and trying to set up this confrontation. And it's sort of a, will Couladin, end up fighting him by the end of this book? The answer is yes. The other characters are doing off their own things. There's a new rebellion starting against the White Tower. The White Cloaks are moving around and doing things. Matt is with Rand right now. Perrin is not in this book. He is not in this book because he already had his little adventures in the Two Rivers. And other characters are sort of sidelined, or they're not. They're following, or they're resting. And the main storyline for me is the Rand stuff. And this book just, it just has this huge, amazing battle. At the end of the book, there's something we haven't seen before, because most of the battles leading up to this book have usually been Trollocs versus human, or Forsaken versus someone with powers with the one power. The battle in this book mixes the one power with Rogue Isle, and then of course you got Isle and like all the other different countries and their men versus Isle, and then they throw little elements in there. It's a really interesting battle. I really enjoyed how long it was. It kept going, and you're like, stop, please stop, and it just keeps going. And so many nice little character beats in there, and it's just crazy how like intense it can get. And then when you think the battle's over, it's not over, and it just keeps going. And this book is the one that sort of takes the cake. It's the one that just simply shows you how rich and like crazy this world can be. This is sort of like the big grand payoff. If you've been reading all of the books right now, every book has their own climax, but this book's climax is just threefold, and it's just insane how much happens. And obviously it just hits you like a brick. And it also mirrors another arc that happens in Invincible as well. There's this sort of cross, this large event in which the planet that the main character is living on is attacked by alternate versions of himself, and it's like this crazy super battle, and then a big battle happens right after, and you're just like, you're not ready, and it just hits you so hard. Because a lot of people, when you're reading a comic book series or reading a book or watching a television show, big payoffs usually happen sparingly, because it's the reason why you watch TV. When someone gets a sword through the gut, or like someone gets shot, it's like, oh, okay, that's the big moment, that's the big battle, it's over. And then when something else happens after, you're just kind of like, oh no, it doesn't happen often, because you can't, once you use up too many of those oh no moments, you don't have enough. But Invincible does it plenty, and this book does too, and it just so interesting. The game of houses is brought in there, and there's a lot of crazy moments in this book. And yeah, so book 5 is the one that sort of shit hits the fan, and I'll definitely keep reading. Lord of Chaos by Robert Jordan is the 6th book on the Wheel of Time book series. So this book is the longest out of all the books. It is 1,000 pages, and that also actually matters because it's a bit different from the other books. So let's get into it. So book 6 starts off with the characters sort of getting upgrades of sorts. And each of these different characters are on their path to trying to get their own goals done. However, this book explores more so things like the Forsaken. A lot of the books before this one don't really go into their plans. They sort of just show up at the end, you know, like they were there behind the whole time they were there. Because they have like... not shape-shifting abilities, but they have the power to hide themselves quite easily. So usually, the book sort of, you're reading it and all of a sudden, oh, it turns out one of the Forsaken was that guy, and we have to battle. This one's different because they actually give you a little bit of, not backstory, but you get to see things from their perspective. There are chapters with the Forsaken having their little meetings. So that's interesting. That's new. That's something that's not been in the other books. Also, this book doesn't have any Trolloc battles in it, I don't think. This book is mostly plotting and cat and mouse type politics. People are building up armies and stuff. So you're getting a lot of potential conflicts. And something really big happens in this book. I really like that. And a different sort of thing happens. I really liked the antagonists. Like, obviously the Forsaken are the large antagonists, but there are other characters and their factions that take place in the world of this world that sort of oppose Rand for reasons. And what I really liked is that these reasons are usually, like, at least believable. You know, there are no factions or characters in this book that are antagonists that just are villains because they have to be villains. It's because they have deep-seated beliefs. For example, the White Cloaks, we get a little bit more detail about how they work, and they think that the Dragon Reborn is a dark friend, so they wouldn't allow any alliance to be formed. It's because of their beliefs, and it's not different from any beliefs people have in the real world. And then there's also the White Tower. They think that they can control Rand, so they have their own little plans to grab him and make him come to heel. And it's something that's interesting because it's nice to have multiple antagonists for a large spanning story. I mean, every couple of books, another Forsaken shows up. This time, this book sort of focuses on the other antagonists that are sort of closing in. There are rogue countries that are going into civil war. There's the Dragon Sworn and Massima. He's become a sort of weird prophet, overzealous person who is killing people in Rand's name. So that's probably something that we have to be dealt with later. And there's also the tumultuous game of houses. Rand has been conquering these different cities, different countries this whole time, but there are people always opposing him because, there are rebels that don't think that he's legit. There are people that think he is the Dark One. They even have the small segment of the book where they're listing all the different rumors. And in this world, you have to remember that there's no technology. The rumors can spread. There are people who, talk in bars. There's pigeons, and, things can ripple and go out and become so warped. Some person sitting on a farm somewhere could get news saying something that isn't even true. And, they don't know because they have to rely on eyes and ears and whoever comes into town or whoever talks to them. And that really shows the unreliable nature of this world in terms of communication. Pigeons, and there's rumors, people giving out false rumors on purpose. It feels like a really real world of networking. What happens when you can't send an email or a text and you have to rely on, like, literally giving someone a letter and hoping they get to the destination and not opening the seal before you get it? Or a pigeon getting intercepted, or fake rumors, things like that. That plays a really big part in this book, which is interesting. However, Lord of Chaos doesn't have the greatest finale. It feels a little rushed, which is weird because it's 1,000 pages. But overall, this book is very large, and it definitely has a lot more setting up than actual payoff. The ending payoff is pretty visceral. I didn't quite like the finale, but there's that big thing that happens at the end that just blew me away. I was like, whoa! But then the book quickly ends. So Lord of Chaos is A little bit different change of pace than the other books. The other books are kind of, they set up the formula. This one's a little bit different because they give you some insight onto what the Forsaken are doing, other antagonists, and the climax is a bit different from others. So that's what I feel about Lord of Chaos.